All right, click the links to become a member of the channel or check out the various other links. Subscribe, Star Odyssey, Bit Chute, Cap TV, whatnot. So, daily dose of cringe. This is like a perfect storm of stupidity for these people, where you're going to see them bend themselves into shapes that violate mathematical topology to try to arrive at the conclusion. They know the conclusion they want, but the way to get there is impossible. So they're gonna make it. Well, they're just gonna lie. They're gonna, if they can't straw man a story, well, then they wouldn't be able to tell this story. So let's look at this story where it looks like it has great settings, great costumes. Filming in Africa is going to be a lot of fun on the grasslands. There's a lot of majestic cinematography with setting suns and that kind of thing, set in 1820. You can have a lot of fun with this, as you can see by their costumes, which don't look historically accurate. Costumes are actually a whole lot simpler, but maybe they had a ceremonial costume that looks something like this. That's fine. So is this going to be fictionalized? Yeah, it would pretty much have to be, because it's so ridiculous if you simply look up the history. So this is set in the historical African kingdom of Dahomey. Open years 1820, which is a lot. Like, it's just so much fun to film back then. But you know, the way to make these movies is not shy away from the standards and practices of the time. It's just to lean into it and go, yep, this was accepted at the time. They can't do that because they're not making movies, they're making propaganda. Because if you say, like, well, what was happening at the time was Africa, and even in current day the same thing is happening, is African tribes are taking involuntary servants, so to speak. Then and now it's still occurring in that area of the world and a little bit north of that area of the world, if you know what I'm saying, which will trigger the algorithm, which is why I have to make this a second time. It's still ongoing, but you just have to say, oh, that's what they did at the time. But what that also does is excuses everyone else, which obviously is the only logical conclusion to reach. You're like, yeah, some small percentage of the population, we know who they are, took part in this. It was a tiny percentage of the population, and they're all gone now. But it was widespread throughout the world. You can't. I mean, what they're trying to do is they're trying to blame modern day people, but only some modern day people who had nothing to do with it. Like, most of us are, like, we're not descended from those people. We're recent immigrants. Like, literally, we came after the Civil War. Had nothing to do with it. We just came as immigrants, not colonizers. But even if you did. Even if you literally were descended from them, like some, I don't know, Rothschilds or Vanderbilt or whatever, those type of folks who were running that trade, it's still not you. It's like you still had nothing to do with it. So, like, the chain of causation, the whole history of this sort of servitude, unpaid servitude, is interesting because it's an L. It's an L for everyone involved, except for it's not an L for us. Like, we had nothing to do with it. We don't give two shits about it because it's like we didn't do it. It may be very important to other people, but it's not important to us because we just have no connection to it. It's like it's a part of history of other people's history is how we view it. It's like, oh, but you all live in America. Yeah, again, there's still no connection to us, which is the way most of us view it. So, like, the more of a spotlight you want to shine on this, the better it is for modern day, because it kind of, that light turns around. You go, oh, yeah, so who started it all? Oh, some black dude started the ball rolling. Oh, that's a pretty serious L. Instantly demonetized. You say some words, like, you know what will trigger the algorithm. Yeah, that's it. The whole thing's a serious L for a lot of people. So anyway, so set in the 1820s, all female warriors. So that's going to be a lot of fun because, I mean, it literally happened, but you got to take the good with the bad. So despite the real world kingdom heavily participated in the era's Atlantic servant trade, they would regularly take their fellow kinsmen from neighboring tribes by way of war or specifically targeted restocking raids and either sell them off to South America, North America, or keep them as their personal property. And there's a word for that. With the practice only coming to an end thanks to the intervention of the British Navy. So the British Navy had tell these people that no, you couldn't trade human beings anymore, the people who you see on the screen before you, the British were the good guys. I'm guessing when you make this movie, the British will not be the good guys, or the French will not be the good guys. I think they were involved also. I mean, it's a fascinating history because it's like they don't want you to look into the history of this stuff because it's, or who was involved, who whose names was on the, never mind. Do you enjoy being on YouTube? I guess, but it's also not the end of the world if I'm shown the door. Because like they want you to kind of vaguely think, oh yeah, that's bummer, bad part of history. It's like, yeah, it's your history. No, it's not my history. It's like it happened to other people. It might be your history because you might be related to those people, but I'm not related. Well, most of us are not related to those people. So it's like, no, the more you shine a light on it, the better, because then you really go down. And people, it's like the left will immediately stop you. They go, no, don't look too closely at it. Don't look too closely at it. We want you to have this vague feeling of guilt. It's like, I don't have any guilt. And in fact, I don't know anyone who does because they have no connection to it. It's like, yeah, we just don't, you can't make us feel something we don't feel. It's like, I didn't do it, so tough titty, I suppose. And which sounds a bit harsh, but just like, you also know they've been trying to beat people over the head with it. It's like, all the people you're trying to blame for this have been gone for 100 years. I mean, you could try a seance and try to talk to them. It's like, but you guys look the same. It's like, we didn't even come from the same country as these people who are responsible for this. And even the people who did, it's like, you're talking about a tiny percentage of a population is responsible for it. So, good luck with that. Get that money while you can, because eventually America is going to be pushing wheelbarrows full of. What happens when you print more money, but it's not backed by, how could you print more money and it would make sense? If you discovered another planet that was habitable or it had some resources, then it would be like that. The paper you're printing would be backed by something physical, like another planet. Like, yeah, we're gonna have a colony on this the moon of Jupiter. We're gonna make an artificial sun or something. I think that was in 2001 where they turned Jupiter into an artificial sun, and they turned the planets that orbit it into, it's a habitable zone for the planets, because those have like roughly Earth gravity. So if you printed money and it was backed by a new planet, that would make sense. New resources on the planet, people were moving there, building something. It's like, yeah, that would make sense. We're gonna do the Star Trek 2 or 3 thing where they they create life on that planet. This Search for Spock, I think, a great movie. So printing dollars, paper money would make sense then, but he's just like America's been printing pieces of paper since probably 1913, Rothschild's fractional Federal Reserve, and then a temporary tax in 1914 that paid for World War I, which temporary tax paid for World. So that was actually endless taxes and endless wars. Gee, didn't the Founding Fathers say we shouldn't be doing any of these things? 1913, 1914. Fascinating history if you want to start going down rabbit holes. But anyway, did I get off track? I don't think I did. Like, honestly, all this stuff is really legitimately related. So yeah, if you want to go get that money, go get those wheelbarrows full of paper money while you can. Enjoy it while you can, because eventually wheelbarrows of paper are going to turn into truckloads of paper. Hey, this is $1 trillion note. Congratulations. You guys diversified the money supply. You turned it into Zimbabwe. So the real history of this tribe, again, you should have just accepted it, which would have meant you would have had to accept it for everybody, and that's unpalatable to them. It's a bridge too far to they can like narrowly filter this blame game to try to blame one group of people. It's like you just look like idiots when you try to do that, when you yourself, as it says here, were buying and selling other human beings who actually look very similar to you because they were just from a neighboring tribe. The way to handle it is go, yeah, we conquered them. We took them as servants. Yeah, that's what humans do. Yes, we had human sacrifices. That's what people did at the time. That's everyone has got some mud in their background. Europeans had witchcraft and the Inquisition. Central South Americans had everyone had human sacrifices if you're going to go back far enough. It's not a big deal. And everyone had captured people, and you either deleted them or took them as servants or took the wives as involuntary wives, sort of thing. Yeah, that's the history of humans, all humans. But it doesn't get them any credit capital to try to say like, yeah, I mean, literally you cannot blame one group of people for what everyone did. So the more like you kind of make these movies, these insane Wakanda movies. So the way they're going to get around that little bit of fiction is by saying in 1820 the woman king will handle the subject by depicting its protagonist as a leading voice in the opposition of the practice. That's just not likely, and it makes you look like idiots when you do this kind of stuff. Like, so you guys, you're the king and you're in charge of taking involuntary servants, but you're against it. But I mean, really, you weren't. I mean, that's because you kept doing it, and in fact, you fought the British so you could keep doing this trade in human workers, unpaid human workers, and I mean, they look like you. This is the people who are doing it. So it's an L for your side. Like even this community, when you make this movie, it's like a lot of this community actually knows the history of this pretty well because they're very well tied to it more than other people are. So even they know the history of it. So you're not fooling them. You might fool some white liberal a little bit, but like all you got to do is do a quick search on this history. It's like, yeah, the movie's fiction. But it's like, okay, so the movie is fiction, but it's fictionalized in a way that I'm assuming is going to make the English and the French look like horrible people. When like the real history is, so you say you're the queen of this tribe and you were against this practice, but you still did. None of that makes sense. How well is this movie going to do? Well, you got a built-in audience, and it's the thing is, it's not like Black Panther where you had a built-in audience of a. Who the lead was, rest in peace, a good-looking dude, and it was this Wakanda city that people just were really into that concept. It's Afro tech or Afro future. It's a science fiction, a genre of science fiction, and they do it to like South America too and Australia. It's throughout science fiction. But you had that was a different audience where this is, and there's is it sexism? It's like, no, that's just a control word. It doesn't mean anything. People want to see men and women in different roles. Now, this is different because this actually happened. So it's not like you're not... This is... I mean, it's a different kind of movie, but I still don't think you're going to get sell a lot of tickets. And she says, well, people have to see this. This is exactly what Elizabeth Banks said about Charlie's Angels, the remake of Charlie's Angels. She said, people have to see this movie because it needs to show that, people will see a woman-led director in a girl film or something like that. And it's like, well, predictably, people didn't see Charlie's Angels by Elizabeth Banks because you were such a cunt in the interviews. And you look like such an insufferable jerk that people didn't go see the movie. Yeah, it's men's fault. But why didn't women go see the movie? So this movie, how well is it going to do? It's like you think you have a built-in audience. Not as much. It'll do fine, I'm sure, but Wakanda is different. Like, you had a built-in audience with a good-looking male lead carrying out a role that you expect men to carry out. Now, this is actual, fictionalized history. They actually were female warriors, so it's a little bit different. I think you're going to do pretty well, but it's not going. I don't think it's going to do Wakanda numbers, especially because. Like, you're fudging the history so much to say she was against it. It's like, that's just not likely. Just go in the other direction. Just lean into it and just let the chips fall where they may. It's like, yeah, this was what we did at the time. It's like, oh, well, yeah, but that applies to everyone, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, it does. It does. Anyway, I hope this makes it. I uploaded the first version and it's instantly demonetized. So we'll see if this makes it past the algorithm. If you say certain words too often, it's like, hey, YouTube, why don't you just tell people the rules ahead of time? We don't want to do that. Okay. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you on Subscribe. Thanks for the recent, folks, and I'll see you next episode.